We are live.
We are live this time. Amazing. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Business Blind Spots. And Cheryl, why don't you kick off just by introducing yourself?
Okay, I am Cheryl Thompson. Happy to be here. I love our sessions. They make me so happy, and especially when people can hear us. So, Cheryl Thompson, leadership coach. Previous background was 20 years in financial services, working on programs, projects, building them up, setting them on the way, closing them down. Just before we went live, we were actually talking about this. A lot of my background was in financial crime as well, not committing financial crime, I might add, but preventing financial crime. And then I decided that my love of humans and human behaviour and what I could do differently with the world of leadership was calling me more. So here I am.
Love that. And I'm Emma Matthews. Similar to Cheryl, I had a long career in the financial services industry, and I've been quite open around my journey with burnout. And really, from those experiences with burnout, I decided to turn the wounds into wisdom, trained as a coach. And now I work with individuals and companies who are seeking to prevent burnout or come out the other side. So, on to today's topic, Cheryl. So, we decided to talk about business blind spots today. What does a blind spot mean to you?
Something you don't know you've got. It says it in the title for me. It's an issue that you're suffering with, or a risk of something, but you can't see it yourself, and it takes somebody else to be able to ask the right questions or hold a mirror up to you and be able to get you to realize yourself this particular concern that you've got. And we all have them. That's the thing. And I also think as well, sorry, just whilst you'll get rid of some blind spots and you'll think, I'm done. And then there'll be another layer of them and another layer of them. So it's not even like a once and done situation. It's every time we grow, we create more and more and more, and we dispel and get rid of them, and then more come. So it's always a process and a journey rather than a in and out job.
Yeah, 100%. And I had a real world life experience of that yesterday. I remember I think I shared this with you, Cheryl. I was being a bit harsh, I think, on some areas where I was looking at kind of things I'd achieved that week, that month, that day. And then had a conversation with my husband, Steve, last night, and he literally held up the mirror on, but what about this? What about this? What about this? And I was suddenly like, okay, yes, actually, it's been an incredibly successful week and month. And for me, it was just one of those moments where it reinforced how important it is to have those people in your life, in your business, that really tell you like it is, and just help to hold up the mirror for you. Because you're so in what you're doing each day. You can't, there's that phrase, isn't it? You can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, and it's true. And there's two that you can see me scribbling things as you're saying, because there's things I want to remember to say back to you. I think what you've described there is so typical of high achievers. Yeah. We just don't see, because you'll see all the things you could have done differently or better or more of, but we rarely sit in the look at what I've done really well and look at the impact I've created. And I think that's always a blind spot for high achievers. And such a lot of people here on LinkedIn will be in that high achiever category, but they won't realize it because that'll be their other blind spot. They won't realize how great they are. But when you said, moving on to the next point, which was people that tell me like it is, and that worked both ways, because last night Steve told you how it was in terms of stop being a muppet, look how great you are. But sometimes you do also need somebody to go, well, what could you have done more of? Or what should you have done less of? What would you do differently next time so you don't feel this way again? So you don't feel like you've not achieved what you need to achieve. And that isn't often something we get from our whole network. It's something you have to go out and seek. I think that honesty, that rawness, where somebody will tell you the truth. And it won't break your heart as they do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's particularly powerful when you invite that feedback so people know it's a safe space to give it, similar as we do between ourselves, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah,
Cheryl, what are you seeing I'm not seeing?
I was about to say that exactly like we do with each other. But that's the power of a strong network, and one that you're mindful of and one that you choose. So now we're talking about blind spots. I think another blind spot that tags perfectly onto what we're just saying is your environment, and just accepting your environment for what it is. So often when we're in the working world, when we're employed, when you join a business, that becomes your new environment. And often we end up amalgamating with that environment. So whatever it is, and we might have taken the job because it sounded all shiny and new, or because we were desperate, or because we couldn't wait to get rid of that old job. There's lots of, not so great reasons why we jump into bed with a new business. Hopefully it's none of those, and it's all proactive and mindful and, and with all the right due diligence done. But let's be honest, it's not always. And when you join an environment, you start to become that environment unless you continue to self-check and regulate. So I think another blind spot is allowing your environment to absorb who you are and change who you are. Whereas what we've done differently, Emma, is because we've met in this whole self-development progress positive trajectory, what we've now done is we've created our environment mindfully. So you and I would have nothing to do with each other if we didn't have any reasons that we served each other and ourselves because of this relationship. We know we get mutual benefits from it. And I think that's a real testament to knowing your blind spots. I've worked in a toxic environment before. I'm not about to create another one myself.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I think as companies scale and grow bigger, you have to be really intentional about that culture that you're creating, because it can quickly spiral into something that you've got teams working against each other, they're very siloed, they've got their own PR plans. And within that, kind of who's thinking about being joined up for the client? Like my dad's going through something at the moment where he was making a complaint to a particular brand and just being passed from pillar to post between different business units. And it's like, no, you are one brand to the client. You have to be joined up behind the scenes. They don't care whose responsibility it is. Just someone needs to take accountability for fixing that.
Yeah, I agree. And but imagine the person that does that, like in your dad's situation. Imagine the person that goes, it's not okay for the business to continue this way. Imagine if you were is your dad, sorry, the employee or the customer there?
The client, the customer.
Yeah. But wouldn't it be great if employees could note that and go, by the way, I think that we're working at odds with each other now. Now, I've gone to meetings before, and I think I was mentioning this to you the other week, where you literally used to sort of arm yourself going in as a representative for your function. And all that, it used to be where there'd be maybe 5 different teams coming together to deliver a project. And it was almost like, how do we get something not to stick on us, rather than, and it was like, throw the hot potato between the teams. How does that work? When do you ever sit there and go, we're on the same side? And I've got to be honest, and I'm not trying to go, aren't I perfect? But I often was that person, because humans just matter to me. It doesn't matter if you're on that team. I was always across many different teams. But you used to hear teams planning and prepping to be able to go in and deflect onto someone else, rather than just get the job done, and learn from it. It was almost this. So I think when your head's down in the sort of work trench, it's about how do you lift your head up and go, this doesn't feel right anymore. What we're doing just doesn't feel right. That's a blind spot. But that, if you don't mind, that sort of links me onto another train of thought that I wanted to mention. And it's really obvious. I said there, it doesn't feel right. One of the things that I think is really interesting with blind spots is your feelings. If it doesn't feel right, it's because it's not right. Something's not right. So, and one of the things that I've noticed with either my clients is they come to me and they've got almost the same issue, but different people or different circumstances. And say if it's a boundary thing, this person keeps asking me to do X, and I don't, and it breaches my boundaries because it's out of my work time, or it's this, or whatever it is, or that's not my job. They keep asking me to do it, but it's not my job, and I've told them it's someone else's job, but they keep asking me, or they keep sending meetings at this time of day when they know I don't work then. And then I have to go back and explain it to them. And if it's the same thing, the same sort of breaching of boundaries, there's a problem there. And what you're doing is you're firefighting by responding to the individual that's raised the thing, the problem. So I think what your blind spot there is some of your processes are letting you down. Why is it not commonly known that what your work hours are? What automation could you put in place that describes when you work and when you don't work? What your boundaries are? And it doesn't have to mean I work Monday to Thursday. I don't even mean that. It means if you want an hour lunch and you're having an hour lunch at 12 to 1 every day, whatever it is, say that and own it. And I'm unavailable at 12 to 1 because that's when I take my lunch. But we often don't do that, and we fight individual problems. And then when we're getting all of these things thrown at us, but they're all the same. When you look at them, there's a commonality between them all. A process has failed, and that's your blind spot. You shouldn't have to be firefighting individually. You should just deal with it in one, issue it, and take the problem away. So I think wherever you've got a pain point that continues to raise its head, that's your problem. That's your blind spot.
Yeah.
But people just deal with it in isolation.
Yeah. And it's really taking the time to go deep into the bigger picture, find out what the root cause is, which can be quite challenging in a big organization because it can affect so many different departments.
Yeah.
And that links to something I think is also a blind spot. Almost there can be this element of groupthink and wanting to pass on good news. So it can take a really brave person actually to put up their hand and say, I think we've got an issue here that we need to work together collaboratively on. It's much easier in, say, smaller startup world where people are more flexible in the roles that they're playing in the company versus big corporates where people become very attached to role title, how things are done, their internal reputation. So that in itself can become a blind spot. As soon as you're protectionist, there's an issue with the culture. You're not working towards a shared vision anymore.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that, because then you think about that person that raises the issue. One of the concerns I had, and I can speak about this firsthand because I was this person. I was always the person that saw the issue, which makes me sound like, but I always wanted to find the solution. Or I always had the solution, but often I was the only one that would speak out about the issue publicly. So when you're always that person that I'd say, I think we've got a concern here that we can resolve if we work together. And everybody would complain about it behind the scenes, but nobody wanted to be the person that stepped forward and gone, I second that. Because people almost wanted to be toxically positive about something. But then the problem you've got is we're being dishonest with each other, because if you're going to say something's a problem outside, you need to be able to have the courage to raise it for the right reasons. So I think wanting to appear always upbeat or positive can be a blind spot, and it can create, we talked about it the other week, it can almost dehumanize somebody because you're saying to them that they can't feel their full breadth of emotions. They can't say when something annoys them or it bugs them. They have to just say when everything's okay. But then you're also loading that one person in the room with the burden or the responsibility of being the one that raises the red flag. And then they're always carrying that weight, aren't they?
Yeah, which is challenging. You quite often see people who come into an organization new have that kind of disruptive factor of, I've got the fresh pair of eyes, I'm kind of here with new ideas, I've got the energy to fix it. And then spot how over time that erodes because you're aware of the energetic outlay of playing that role. So it's actually made me think, Cheryl, it's kind of, how can you make sure as an organization you have those people who hold up the mirror and they are emotionally supported in that role, because it's so valuable for your organization, particularly as it gets bigger.
Yeah, and I think to be quite challenging here, I think a lot of people talk the talk that they want that, but a lot of people aren't willing to commit to it. So you've got to be honest with yourself. And I mean, this is to the leaders of these businesses. Do you want a mirror holding up to your business? Yes or no? Because it's not always an easy ride. You've got to be willing to swallow, smile, and hear. Because most people get really defensive when a mirror is held up to them. Yeah, most people go, well, it's because what you don't know is we've tried that before and that didn't work last time. And, there's the whole sort of justification of it. So I think, first of all, it's got to be a self-reflection. Is this important enough to you, or is it just lip service that you want to have this mirror? And I know I am challenging in that way, but I think, yeah, you've got to know it yourself. And then I think there's a few things here. So I think you should have those people internally that are part of the employment and part of the staff that you support, and that you celebrate their courage, publicly celebrate it. And this is, I think, really important as well. There's no point just talking about it and going, well done, Emma, well done for raising this, that must have been really difficult for you. You then have to do something with that information. Because if a person continues to raise things to you and you go, yeah, well done, nothing changes. You're teaching them that their word means nothing and that their courage means nothing. So do something with what you've been given. And even if it takes months and months, just keep the people up to date. One of the things that I always say about businesses that ask for feedback, and I know lots of really good businesses that do, that have their monthly meetings where they go, give us some feedback, but then nothing changes. Well, eventually I just turn up to the meeting and go, yeah, everything's fine. Because you're breaching the trust, and that's your blind spot. You think you're asking all the right questions, but because you do nothing with it, you've basically just betrayed that person's courage. So there's that. So keeping that person, listening to them, hearing them, and then taking action. But I also think that's a really big responsibility for anyone inside a job to keep doing, even if they're getting rewarded for it, even if they're getting the pat on the back and the recognition. And even if you've got a bunch, and everybody's doing that, say if that's the whole company, because it's that type of business, before you realize it, you can easily create an echo chamber. Even the best of people can, where all you ever do is replicate each other's, oh, well, if she spoke out last week and she got a pat on the back, so I'll speak out about this thing. But you're almost doing it for the wrong reasons. And that's why I think an external injection, so a consultant, somebody coming in from the outside, and actually, and this is the way I used to do it in previous companies I worked for, with no agenda. So almost giving this external person a blank sheet of paper and saying, join our business, spend some time with us, and just watch, just listen, just feel, just see, understand the sense of this place, and feedback in a few weeks. That I had a CEO that did that with me once, and actually it was for months. He just sent me around and said, I'm leaving it to you. See how this feels and come back to me. And he chose me to do that because he said, because I know you have the courage to be honest with me where others don't. And it was probably the most insightful piece of work I've ever done. And what we did afterwards, he followed up with structures, different things. But you've got, to have a CEO who wants to do that, that takes real guts. Yeah, and it won't always be easy. But then what I would say, and sorry, I'll stop talking on this soon. What I would say is the point of me and you, this is what our job is. We go in, we've been consultants, we've worked at the top level, we've worked at C-suite, we're coaches, we know to ask the right questions, quality questions. We've got diplomacy, we've got tact, we've got honesty, but all of those things that we can do and can bring to a business. And we've got that fresh pair of eyes, and we've got no risk. So if we say, there's nothing that we need to protect, it's not my bonus or my promotion that's on the line. So, that's me more empowered. But I just think if you bring those people in, we'll do it in a safe way as well. That's the difference. No CEO wants you to come in and devastate their business. We know about, incremental steps of building a business and a structure. We know how to build on top of foundations. We know where to start in the business. There's no point starting here when you're hemorrhaging money here. So it's having an expert in and having the courage to ask for it.
Yeah, that independent perspective without an agenda, without an ego in the situation is absolutely key. And so, so much came up from what you said, actually.
It's because I didn't stop talking.
Thinking about the model of the in-house person who is the disruptor. I think another challenge with that issue is quite often that person then becomes the house for all the work that gets unearthed from them holding up the insights, and then it becomes completely unsustainable. And you get to the culture of, actually, I know if I raise an issue, I'm then going to be the one that has to fix it. And it's not doable within my current workload. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. And it's so funny you say that because, and this is me going back to my time, I was often, like I said earlier, the one that I'd go, this isn't working. We need to look at this differently. And I was really firm on saying, but I'm not doing it. We need to work out who the best person is. I may have identified the issue and I can help you facilitate it, but I'm not doing this because that group of people need, because this is the other thing. This is a big blind spot, I think, that leaders have. I would say almost every client I've ever worked with has this issue, and I used to suffer with it, and that's why I can talk to it. The blind spot here is our capacity to save and rescue people rather than coach and empower.
Mm-hmm.
So what you just talked about there, if you're the person that identifies the problem that's impacting people, there's a real ego boost here for being able to go and save the day. And that means doing. So that's why high achievers, typically female, I think, but certainly those with feminine energy, I think, want to give and give and give. And so that can be men as well. That's why I say the feminine energy. And solve, fix. And in doing that, your blind spot is that you're stealing an opportunity for other people to find their own solution. So you can identify something, but don't fix it. And often one of the really difficult things conversations I have with my clients is, have you ever let somebody trip, or have you ever let something break? And they go, no, I could never do that. I said, I know this feels really difficult, but sometimes people have to feel their own pain to learn from it. But because you never let anyone feel any pain, it just feels like easy sailing, because you're running around catching things and putting out fires without anyone even knowing the value that you're adding. So that whole, and also, sorry, the problem there is they become resentful of a situation and of a group of people and of a team, and they feel undervalued and they feel like they're not getting paid enough, because actually what they're seen to be doing here and then what they're not seen to be doing over here, when you add those two things together, they should be getting paid a lot more money, and no one can even thank them for it, because you've created a blind spot in someone else by just saving things behind the scenes. When I then explain that to somebody, the amount of people that sit there and are like, oh God, so I caused this. Yeah, that was your blind spot. You didn't give people the opportunity to thank you for your value that you'd added, because you just secretly saved the day.
Yeah, and the challenge with that model is it then creates an ongoing dependency on the leader, because people don't know how to fix things themselves, or the capable ones who want to do that move on. So you end up building a team, a culture of people who look to you as the leader to fix everything and to save them, and it creates a nightmare for you. Yeah. And probably we've all experienced those moments of disguised as coaching where someone's told you what to do. Mm-hmm. And if you're someone who's a high achiever, smart person, it's so disempowering.
What did you sent me a message on this the other day for the human design. And yes. You said to me, because I don't know if people follow human design, and I'm not an expert, you know far more about it than I do. But we're of a similar category. And I, like, in terms of how we operate within this world, we're the same category, not similar, we're the same category. So you'd found something that said, for our particular way of working, somebody going, I trust you to go and solve the thing or do it, is the way to work with people like us. And I remember sending it back to you going, oh my God, this is me. I take it this is you too. Because if somebody ever said to me, I cited them on what I was doing, I'm going to do, this is what I found, this is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. And they went, sounds brilliant. And I completely trust you to do this. If you need me, you know where I am, but you've got this. I'd have been like, oh, I can do it. I would have loved it. It would have been brilliant, because that whole sense of, they've got, this whole assurance that they're basically telling you bring to the business. But so many leaders take and do, and like, I'll take this off your desk. No, let people learn. And even if it means them getting it wrong, let them learn and show them that it's safe to make mistakes. Because I think that is another blind spot. Everything having to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And not daring to go, we got this wrong. Yeah. Okay, what do we do differently next time? Things can go wrong. We're humans. But creating that psychological safety and being able to say that to your clients as well, your customers, I think that's a real strength, which, showing your vulnerabilities and your flaws, people don't like to do that. And I think that causes a blind spot, because it almost creates a distance and a truth. It feels fraudulent, what you're putting out into the world.
Yeah, it creates a barrier, 100%. And it also creates issues for the business, because people will feel like they need to cover up their mistakes, and then suddenly you've got a huge corporate scandal going on because something that could have been kind of fixed at this level blows out of proportion because it's not a safe environment to say, hey, we've messed up here.
Yeah, definitely. I tell you, one of the best places. So people know I've worked in consultancy and the Big Four. One of the best places I worked at for that exact thing was when I worked at EY. I went there thinking I had to be perfect, and it was almost laughable that perfect existed. And they were not, and I don't mean in like a saying that they didn't have quality work. They were incredibly high quality, but they were really good at going, we'll try it this way. And if that doesn't work, we'll try it another way. You know, that they were really good at trial and error and learning from what they'd done and reinvesting that back into their product or their service or whatever. And if you messed up, they really created a culture of, that's cool, just come and tell us. They did so much training on it. In fact, it blew my mind. Like, you know, when you're being onboarded, but they said, if you do this, if you do that, it's cool. These things happen. There's nothing we haven't seen, because you've got to think of the size of the company. It was really a wonderful thing. And actually, what it did, it safely let me know I could make mistakes, but it actually made me not want to, but not in a fearful way, in a wanting to give them something back. Does that? So I don't mean I didn't dare make mistakes. I did. If I got it wrong, I told them. And when you're in that type of fast-paced, high energy, there's lots of things that you can get wrong. But I mean, I wanted to reward their faith in me by giving them everything, you know, giving them what I had and being open with them. So I really thought that was a brilliant way of doing it. And it helped me with risk management, because, you know, a lot of people talk about perfectionism, and I think perfectionism and procrastination go hand in hand. And I think if people sit there and go, if it's not 100%, then I'm not letting it go. It's not going off my desk until it's 100%. And it delays the whole thing. Whereas when you get sort of much closer to being able to go, done is good enough, and we'll send it out, and I'm allowing people to critique the work I've done and it come back. But so linking that to blind spots, perfectionism for me is a blind spot. And we almost badge it up as something to be proud of. So I'm a perfectionist. Whereas I go these days, because I used to be, I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, almost like I'm a recovering AA. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm working on it. Sometimes things pull me back, and sometimes when things aren't perfect, it stings. I mean, less, it doesn't really now, but it used to when I was recovering from it. But that was something I knew was debilitating for my career, because I was holding on to things longer than I should have done. So if you're out there and you're perfectionist, believe me, you need help. You need help with coach. You need help with your leadership, something. You need some input so somebody can help you, you know, uncurl your fingers off what it is and back yourself.
Yeah, I think perfectionism often goes really deep as to why it's there.
Childhood deep. Yeah.
100%. And you're right, if it's not dealt with, A, you're not being super productive at the time, B, you're a prime candidate for burnout as you get more senior, because it's absolutely impossible to uphold impossible standards. And I think from a lot of what you were saying, what comes up for me, Cheryl, actually is it's knowing the people you're trying to attract. So when you were at EY, they only recruit people that have high standards, who are smart. So actually for that type of person, the message that it's okay to make mistakes is going to have the intended effect of letting them know that they can experiment, versus, I don't know, in another environment,
yeah,
whether it would reduce standards and people would hold it up as, oh, well, you said I can make mistakes.
Do you know, it's a really interesting perspective, that, because, and it depends upon what your definition of mistake is. So from a very early age, and this comes from my granddad, the mistake for me was not learning. So if you do something and you get it wrong and it's, you know, it didn't work, that him and I would say that wasn't a mistake. That was just trying. You were just trying. And you say to me, as long as you've tried your best with what you've got, then you're good. You know, that's all you have to answer to. If you did the same thing with the same situation, and you got the same outcome, for me, that's a mistake. Because why did you think you'd get a different, all things, I mean, rarely that ever happens. That doesn't actually really happen, where you've got the same, you know, circumstances, same situation. But if you do the same thing and you expect, then you've made a mistake there, because you're not going to get a different result. And then I would start to question your commitment to caring about whether you make a mistake or not. That's where it's different. I think you're exactly right. The environment I was in, we were all high performance, high achievers. And not only that, we also all really cared about the business. So when I used to look at, and maybe this is the northerner in me, because I've done this wherever I've gone, and maybe it's my financial services background. Wherever I went, I wanted to see the cost and the quantity. So I wanted to see it in pounds or dollars or whatever currency it was we were working in. So a cost of a meeting, I would look at what your hour rate was and my hour rate, and I'd think, well, that, or whoever was in the room, that's how much this meeting's costing us in terms of actually to be here. Then there's the opportunity cost of what we're not doing. And are we getting the right outcomes for the cost of this meeting? And if we're not, I need to change something. So that was the type of people, so I suppose, that we worked with. So saying, then when you think about, can you make mistakes? What was the cost of that mistake? So that was the way, that was my inner working anyway. I didn't need anyone to force that on me. So making a mistake, even though it was safe to make a mistake, it didn't mean that I enjoyed them any. It didn't mean that they were okay or comfortable. It just meant I wasn't going to I didn't have to ever hide anything. I never would have done anyway, because that's just not how I work. But it encouraged, they said exactly what you said. Tell us now and we can fix it. Leave it, a few weeks or whatever, and it gets out of our grasp, and then we've got a different problem. So they would have been annoyed at that. If you brought a problem to them too late down the line for them to capture it, they would have been like, that's not okay. That's not how we work here. We could have fixed this on day one had you just brought it to us. And it was made really, really clear to us on that.
Yeah. And it developed such a better relationship. I remember in kind of middle point of my corporate career, I took on my first chief of staff type role. And I had such a good relationship with the leader that I was the right-hand person to, because it was very much that, if you've messed up, tell me. And I'd just go in. We were working with such a high volume, high pressure. There was stuff that was going to fall out. So I'd go into the session and be like, this has happened. This is what I'm doing about it. Are you okay with that? Yeah, fine.
But did you see that bit? I think that's crucial there. And it's either because of who you are, which I think, knowing who you are, that's who you are, but also the environment that you were working within. That's why it's important to pick your environment and do your due diligence on a business. You didn't go in and say, I've broken this, or this is not working. What can I do? You went in and said, this has happened. This is what I'm doing about it. I'll give you an update by then. Done. Okay. Yeah, great. Anything that I've missed here? So you'd covered all and welcomed in feedback. And then that's that whole environment again about you not allowing yourself to be saved or fixed, and you not having a boss that was always going to save or fix you, because you were more than capable of dealing with your own stuff yourself. And that's that cyclical. And that's why I'm saying, I don't know if it was you or your boss or a combination of both. I think, that's typically you, but I know you as well, and that's you. But it's certainly an environment. But if you can't, if you'd had a boss that kept saving you every time, eventually you wouldn't go in with the solution. You'd just go in with the problem.
Yeah. And it's made me realize I've never had that type of boss, because I guess you'd pick up the energy of it in interviews and things and think, no, this isn't going to work.
And actually, even though, I've been through burnout and had bullying and different things in my career, I would say my career, I've almost been my own boss in every job I've ever had. So when I used to really struggle to say I had a manager, and it wasn't a disrespectful thing. I really don't mean that in a rude way, but because every person I've ever worked for, even the challenging times, they've almost gone like, she knows what she's doing, shout when you need us.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had other challenges for other reasons, but certainly never about my work product. As in Cheryl Thompson's work product. That was always, so I've always felt like I was self-employed from a really early age because of that, because I would just go in and communicate where I was at with things. And it was like, brilliant. What do you need? What don't you need? What, that type. But it was more like a peer review rather than like a team, a genuine team. But I think that is down to what you say. And seeing as we're talking about, blind spots, I think another blind spot people have is culpability of what they're putting out there. So, and this, people might not like what I'm about to say, victimhood, so this whole like, this keeps happening to me. Why do I keep getting this? Well, probably because something you're creating. And it's not about victim blaming. I think I must say this every other week, because you have to almost go, I'm not victim blaming. But what I am saying is take some responsibility for what you put out into the world. Because if you keep attracting a certain type of human, there's a lesson in there. There's something you need to work out. And it's not, the world's not cruel. It's trying to help you progress and your brain to manage something. So it's not being done to you. And we hear this all the time, don't we? Certainly in our coaching industry, it's being done for you. Be grateful for the opportunity to resolve that problem or that issue, but don't act like it's a victim mentality. Go out there and own it and get help with it. But often before people start working with me, the blind spot they've got is that they've fallen into the poor me, why does this keep happening to me, instead of taking it as a what can I do differently about this? Because the common factor is always you.
Yeah, and that's a challenging place to live, actually. If you're feeling done to and as a victim, there's no empowerment in there to fix it. You've given your power to other people or other processes to dictate how you feel, versus looking at, okay, what do I want to think and do in this situation so I can be more at the cause stage rather than feeling the effects, which is why coaching is amazing to help you reframe that.
Exactly, because it is just a reframe. And you think about if you're a leader watching this call now, and I don't care what anyone says, there will be leaders out there that know on their team that they've got people turning up to their business and they go, and it's the victim mentality. Imagine bringing in a coach that can help that person, not you, manage it, but help that person turn up and manage their own circumstances. So they turn up as the person that walked in the door the first time. And you taking some responsibility, because somehow, yes, that person that we're talking about, that in this situation, the team member has somehow dipped into this victim mentality where they feel done to and they feel disempowered. The empowering thing is to bring them in somebody independent that can help them change it, and that they self-manage, they correct their own trajectory in their own path. And then the reason why you're bringing it in is because you're part of that environment that created the victim mentality. So we're all responsible for ourselves, but when you've got a leadership role, you have to know when to step out and bring someone in. And then that person steps back out again and you step back in. And one other thing I would say as well is then that coach can help facilitate that working relationship. I don't know if you've ever done this, Emma. I'm sure you have, but I've been in coaching scenarios where I get the leader and the coach, the coachee into the room, and I empower them to have a conversation with each other with me being present. And what I might do is I might pause them at times, and they've got to both be receptive about this, to say, so the question that you've just asked was da, 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 and almost like replaying their words back to them in the moment. So they've got to be willing to be vulnerable in front of each other, and they've got to want the best from it. But it's yielded like incredible results, being able to help them learn how to communicate with each other.
Yeah. And that works so powerful, well, at any level in the organization, but also if you get the sense that things are not actually all fine at the top, having those really open conversations about the individual relationships and the collective, because you can guarantee if at the C-suite you're not functioning as you might like to, that is the ripple effect of that is huge across the organization. And there's tools that you can use to make that an easier conversation to have. But at the end of the day, it is just a real conversation about, okay, this is my view of the world. What's yours? How can we meet in the middle?
Exactly. And, actually, that's one of the reasons why I started coaching, for what you've just described there. I was working in an environment where the very senior people in the C-suite were all against each other. And then they were going back to their respective parts of the business, and that was filtering out. So everybody was against each other. And it took one person actually, that's not true. It took a few of them, but individually. And they both ended up sitting and saying, Cheryl, how do I deal with this? Because I'm getting to the point where everything's a battleground. And it ended up being almost like a communication masterclass on. So, and I remember over one coffee, we did said, well, tell me how it happened. And when they described it back, I was like, is that really how it happened? And they were like, yes. Again, blind spots is we think we communicate in a certain way, and our brain wants us to be right. That's the truth of it. Our brain is, confirmation bias. It's going out there trying to find reasons why we're right. And when you play back someone's words to them and say, let me just repeat back to you what you've just said to me, the words that you've just used, and you say them back, and say, if you were on the receiving end of those words, how would that feel to you? Well, I don't know if I said it that way. That's the way you've just said it to me. So it's likely you may have said it that way or something similar. And when you sort of share, it's like what you said at the very beginning, the mirror, when you put the mirror up in front of somebody and you go, how would it feel to be on the end of you, to be and it suddenly starts to change it. But it takes a really brave person to be able to say that to a C-suite and say, I'm doing this for your benefit. I want you to be safe, and I want you to be aware of you and what presence you take in this world. So let's do that together. And that changed for the company I was working with. That really had a big impact. And it was interesting. It was two very senior men as well, very successful, very powerful, very influential, absolute experts in their own silos. And somehow they just kept doing this, and everybody sided with it was almost like a street war type thing. Everyone sort of took their sides. Yeah. And it just took for us to have that conversation. And they didn't realize that all it was their communication and how they almost undermined each other without intending to. And then when the other blind spot was where that came from, where that fear of being able to communicate wholly. And that actually really led to some very deep answers and some exploration. And then we built a different business, a different process, and different things coming together. And it was much better, much more collaborative. But it takes that whole somebody having the courage to go, I don't think that's how it happened, or I don't think that's how it feels, or how does it feel, to reflect, to ask the right questions. And so many people don't do that.
Yeah, I love that. Such a powerful example. And so we've talked about so many different types of blind spots, haven't we, today? It's been a really wide agenda, how to identify them, essentially the mistakes that the organisation keeps making, the pain points that cause continuous issues and that you've put plasters on. Generally, there's a blind spot in there, a root cause. Mm-hmm. So perhaps to wrap up the conversation today, Cheryl, let's say there's a business leader listening to this. They know there's some blind spots in the mix for them. What can they do about it? What would you advise?
First, I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Honesty. Be honest with yourself. Are you willing to do everything that's necessary to fix this? I think the other thing to do as well is ask yourself what the cost is of doing nothing.
Yeah.
And is that something you're willing to swallow? Are you okay with that? Once you've got that answer, because that's sort of your buckle up warning, isn't it? Get ready for this. Then I would say reach out to a coach, a business mentor, a trainer, somebody that can come in. And, and obviously, whilst I'm here, that's us. But equally, it might not be us. It could be someone else, because you've got to make sure it works for you, and you've got to be able to hear what that person's saying. Look at their credentials, look at their background, look at, do you trust them? Do you like them? And then bring them in. And I still do believe the best thing to do is bring them in without too much of a agenda. Allow them to find what the issues are, because this, Emma, doing the work that you do, what we think is our issue, what we go and say, this is my problem here.
Yeah.
We've done it in our own exploration and self-development journey. It's normally right down here what your actual problem is. So this is just the outcome, or we were talking about the cause and effect. This is the outcome of it, the problem. We need to go and look at what the thing is rather than the outcome. So go and get an expert in, go and get someone to help you and make a difference. Be true to your word. Don't just pay lip service to wanting to look after your team. And often looking after your team is looking after you first.
Yeah, 100%.
I know so many leaders that put coaching onto their team. They need to have the coaching too.
Yeah, or the opposite. There's the leader who's kind of, as part of their package, they get the executive coach, and actually not recognizing the benefit that can have in other parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the ripple effect is huge. And the thing I want to add on to what you were saying, which I agreed with completely, another powerful lens to look at this through is, with the issue as it is today, what is this going to look like in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years time? Because quite often you're seeing a trend. that's actually going to get a lot worse. And then I also love the perspective of when I look back on this phase of my career as a leader in hindsight, what is the story that I want to tell myself about how I led at this point? That for me is just such a powerful lens to look at any situation through, because it suddenly makes you think, okay, yeah, I really want to make the most of now and operate in a way that future me is going to be proud of.
See, I love that. And I actually had a client conversation today, a session, and this person might be watching, where there's a particularly challenging situation right now. And I said, it's exactly what you said. I said, jump forward 12 months. If you do nothing, jump forward 12 months and tell me what the cost will be. And we went through everything, both personally, professionally, clients, a whole sort of cross section of the business. If you do nothing today and you tolerate this situation, where will it get you to? And we talked about the environmental costs. So people will their standards will start to drop. The business will change how it was. The values will be forgotten. Will be unrecognizable in 12 months' time, and will be unwell as a group of people, because this isn't who we are. Okay. Are you okay with that? Not at all. No, of course you wouldn't be. What's one thing that you can do today? One thing. Let's just work, because sometimes we can get overwhelmed when we look that further forward. We think, well, how do I fix all that? Let's safely bring it back in, and let's do this incrementally. What's one thing difference you can do? And what I would say to anyone listening to this, if they recognize themselves in any of these scenarios, the one thing you can do is reach out for help.
Perfect. Exactly what I was going to say. And there's actually such a freedom in having someone supporting you through that process, who looks at things through coming at it from working in a completely different environment. I wish I had started coaching earlier in my career, actually, like had the benefit of a coach working with me. It would have saved so much pain. But anyway, we got there.
But not just for you, for the ripple effect of that. Because when we're better leaders, we're better for everyone else. When we have boundaries, those boundaries are respectful for other people. So we're teaching people in everything we do and everything we don't do. So the investment of one coach for one person really does have a filter effect, but do it at the right level for the right reasons and the right person. And then that should be able to filter down. And if it doesn't, get other coaches in. It's so much more cost effective. That's what I suppose where I get like, I don't get it. I think I did a post on this ages ago, and it was almost a one line. It was like, coaching always pays you back. For the investment that you put out, it pays you back. Moreover, my clients, the amount of pay, the pay rises they get, or the respect they get, the things that aren't quantifiable necessarily, like you said it earlier about the freedom you have when someone's walking alongside you, just knowing someone's got your back and will tell you the truth before anyone else, before anything happens, that's immeasurable. That having that space, we've said it before, and I think you use the words best, creating that space for somebody. You can't talk about the cost and the value, return on the value for that one. For me, it's just return on investment. That was a hard thing for me to say, but it's there. So I just think, coaching's ace. That's why we do it, because we see the value.
Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful point to bring today to a close on. If anything in today's session has resonated with you, you want to go deeper, just drop me or Cheryl a DM, and we'll be happy to have a conversation about what that could look like. And we'll be back doing more of these as well.
And the only thing I was going to just quickly say, and then I will stop talking, was if people have seen us both working here together, we've both got our own careers and do different things, but I think we can both we can work together and bring each other in at different points as well, because I think you and I have got a really great, unique approach to things. So coming at it from two different lenses, I think, is a really fantastic sort of opportunity. So reach out to either one of us or both of us or whatever. But I suppose all I mean, if someone reaches out to me, I think there's lots of things where I could go, that's not me, that's Emma. I think you need to have Emma in your business. So
and within the same business, we work well with different types of people, different personalities as well.
Yeah, so we wouldn't ever mind doing that as well. If I'm happy to go, that's, bow out, that's an Emma situation because she's X or Y. So yeah, all I'm saying is it doesn't matter who you speak to. We're the X. We'll work it out.
Yeah, we're joined up, not siloed.
Exactly. That's not a blind spot for us.
I love that. So let's draw today to a close, and we'll let you know the next time we'll be live, coming to you soon.
I love that. Thank you.